Well, hello, and welcome once again to the Far From Normal radio show. I am Jay Moss, your host, and as always, I've got Mr. Bud Vino. Bud, how are you doing? Well, hello, and welcome.
I hear an echo.
Yeah.
And you, my brother from another mother, Jay, Tuesday, March 12, 2019. Jay, we're ready. We're ready to go again as always with us.
Oh, this is great. What in the world?
Yeah, hey, I think somebody's got their volume up, and that might be causing the echo.
I would say so, but that's just putting me on task, Jay. It's making me, work at the top of my game.
Yeah, there we go.
So anyway, yo, guys, happy Tuesday, the 12th of March, 2019, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time with my brother from another mother, as I said, always Jay Money Moss, and Randy Davis, Mr. President, fashionably late as always. Randy, how you doing, brother?
Brother, I've never been better. I've been playing around outside. We had the great flood ended, and the skies opened up, and there was sun behind it. We actually had sunshine, so I played around out there. It was good to see Jay. I was going to say you could say that again, but he did. He did like 3 times.
Yeah.
Intro. So I don't know what happened there, but
I'm going to preface
here.
Yeah, Randy, make sure, because I just stepped on you, but we're going to make sure neither Jay nor I step on you when we have our guest at the end come on and say, rev it up.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Last time I shortcutted myself and didn't have Cowboys for Trump, Josh Davis, and Royal De Niro. I forgot to have them say rev it up. I don't know what I was doing.
Did you blame Jay? You should have.
It's always Jay's fault.
Hey, that's the way it works. When I have to do the audio and the video, then I guess it's always my fault. So I'll take that blame.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
Jay, quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the people out there, I saw Jay. You put a couple of the old shows from years ago. That was fun. So people can go on your wall and check that out. Jay put some of the old Blog Talk radio shows. So, great stuff.
Well, and we're currently trying to transfer a lot of the shows either from the Far From Normal radio shows Facebook. We're getting a lot of them out there from the Watchmen that we haven't got out yet to a website on Facebook called the Future of Our Children's Video Network. If you have not gone out there and like the page and follow the page, please do, because we will be sharing all of our shows out there. Anybody who is on the network that we have, we will definitely be sharing every single show out there. That way you can see every show available. Could be that Yahya McClain does a show and it'll end up being on there. Could be anybody that does a show for the Future of Our Children's Video Network. It will be there. Trust me. It's just taking a little bit of time, and Facebook doesn't like the fact that I think I transferred about 20 shows in about 2 minutes, and I didn't think they'd like that. So
all good things come to those who wait, my brother.
Exactly. So we have a very, very interesting guest tonight, and this is a topic that is very controversial. A lot of people don't want to hear it. They want to sweep it under the rug that it ever happens, but it does. And I think that it's very important that I preference this by saying some of the things that you may or may not hear tonight are graphic, in detail. So if that's something that doesn't really click with you, you might want to change the channel right now, because there are some very, very sick individuals out there who are preferencing even under the cloth. And that is a very, very atrocious thing. And so without further ado, excuse me, I'm going to bring on Kelly Haines. Kelly, how are you doing out there?
I'm good. Thank you.
Great. We've got you on. We've got you mic'd and everything else. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here tonight. We greatly appreciate it. And I'm sure my co-host would like to thank you as well.
Yeah, Kelly, Bud Vino here. We talked briefly in the pre-show, and I've been looking at a lot of your things. As I said to my wife earlier today, you're brave, immensely brave. And as I said to her as well, and to a couple of friends talking about the show we're going to be doing tonight, that it's a necessary show. It's a difficult show, but it's necessary. And to come forward and do this. My hat's off to you. You're one of the bravest guests we've had, and thank you for coming on. Take guts and courage.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say the same thing, Kelly. I understand these kind of things can be traumatic, and then re-going through everything, whether it be on here, and as we understand, you've also, uh, I guess, recently went through a series of interviews and met with producers and produced something with an upcoming show that's going to be a big deal too. But going back through that, I'm sure is re-traumatizing, reliving everything. So hats off for you for doing it. You're doing it for the right reason. I think it takes a lot of courage and inner strength. And I do believe you're doing it to help other people. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that need to hear this. This is not what you normally hear from the so-called little talk shows that are done on Facebook, Blog Talk, Zoom, and so forth. But we go right to the heart of the matters that matter. And I think this is something that really, really matters. So love you and glad to have you here.
Thank
Yes,
you. I appreciate you guys having me too.
Yep, you are very welcome. And I want to preference this by saying, again, if you are not of the weak of heart, this may not be the show for you, because there are a lot of things that people, even in the church world, if you go to a church and you believe some of the things that you believe that maybe that your pastor or your priest or whoever it may be can do no wrong. Well, we are all humans. We are all people who make mistakes, and some of these mistakes are very, very drastic. They cost people their lives. They cost people their sanity. They cause people PTSD and everything else that goes along with what you've already experienced. So Kelly, if you would, I'm going to open up the mic to you and let you tell us a little bit about your story. And I'm not going to interrupt. I don't think any of us want to interrupt you during that time, because I think your story has to get out there. And as we said, a recent production, we can say that you have already done an interview that will be airing very, very shortly on Dr. Oz. So that will be coming up. So this story has been well vetted. This is not one of those stories where we're coming out and we're saying, hey, Kelly has this accusation, she's getting it out there. No, this person is convicted, tried, found beyond a reasonable doubt to be guilty. Okay, so Kelly, if you would just go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. Thank you. I guess to go back to the beginning, when I first actually met John Longacre, I was 14 years old. I was in a church school at the time, and I was in ninth grade. He came in as a business teacher / Bible teacher. That first year, he did teach me business and also a Bible class. So that's the first that I met him. I did not really, actually, as funny as it says, I didn't really care for him at first when I first met him. We just didn't get along. And, as time progressed, I had some eating disorder issues and some self-harm issues that he had taken notice of and reached out to me. And so because of those issues, I actually started to begin counseling with him. It was not like a formal counseling, like a paid counseling. He wasn't a counselor of any sort. He was just like the teacher that everybody went to. And so we began counseling more like probably the end of my ninth grade, beginning of my 10th grade year. And it was very subtle, the changes in our relationship. It's people assume that like, bam, it just happened. No, like it took 2 years to happen. Just a continuously pushing of boundaries that at the time I didn't realize as a 14, 15-year-old girl. I didn't know what, that was pushing the boundaries. I just assumed, okay, this is the teacher. I believe what he's doing. I believe what he's saying. I was very much like having emotional issues to be able to decipher all of those things. It just it just was impossible for me to do. And so so for my ninth and 10th grade year, I would say that he took those 2 years to spend just grooming me to um, certain behaviors, just rubbing the back of my neck, um, just standing very close to me on a chair. And, at times I could feel like his erectile penis, like against my back. And, like at first, like I didn't know what was going on. So you kind of just avoid it. And then like he just gets a little bit more brazen so that that he's deliberate. And it was just a bunch of confusing and like it just hard to like figure out like what's going on here. Like, does this guy love me? What's you're desperate at that moment when you're in an emotional situation to find someone who cares, who's going to listen. And that's what he gave me. He gave me that care and listen. And so it progressed. At 16, on my 16th birthday, and there is a reason for that, we did end up having oral sex, which would have been the first time that we had engaged in anything that would be considered a felony. I say that because that's important in this story, because the legal age of consent in Pennsylvania is 16. So he knew that 14 and 15 would get him in a lot of trouble. 16 changes the law. And this is again 20 plus years ago. So so my 16th birthday, then we did eventually like start getting the friendship and the development moved forward. A lot of people ask me like, well, like what were you thinking? And I can't explain anything more than to say it was such little steps, little pushing of the boundaries, little things that to the point where I got so comfortable, it didn't, it just didn't register as being like, okay, I trusted him. I relied on him. I believed that he had my best in mind. So, when you're in that emotional state, what you do is you just believe that even though this doesn't feel right, I'm still going to do it. So that was pretty much my 11th and 12th grade year, was just basically letters. Like we would write letters back and forth to each other. There was just as much interaction as we possibly could have. We did it inside the church. We did it inside on, up the stairs in the baptistry, in classrooms. I mean, a lot of things that happened right in front of people and no one even noticed, because you just have that that trust for somebody and you don't think that they would do that. But there were times when even like I'd be taking his son out to the car to put him in the car seat, and he would be right behind me, pushed up against me as I'm doing that, and there would be people everywhere, and no one even noticed. I never told anyone. The whole time. Someone asked me one time, why didn't you tell? And I said, because I just knew I couldn't tell. If I did tell, then this could either ruin the relationship, or, it would like, I would get in trouble. And that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. Around my 11th grade year, I had asked another teacher, I said, what would happen if like a student had a relationship with a teacher? And you got to remember, this is all under the steeple of the church, because I went to a church school, from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade was only a few hundred students. And that teacher said something that I'll never forget. And it's definitely a part of my story now, because he said, well, the student would get expelled and the teacher would be released. And at that moment, I was put on the same level as he was. And so I thought, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to get expelled. My parents will kill me, like that was what was going through my head. I mean, as irrational as that sounds, that's what was going through my head. Never abuse, never, like, this guy's just trying to help me. And so that's pretty much the story in and of itself, going from when I first met him to when I graduated. I graduated in 1996 and went off to Christian college. He moved to another school, a church school. And after my first year of college, I came back and visited with him, and I could see the same behaviors all over again with these younger girls. And I had confronted him the night before I left and just said, what's going on? Like, I thought that I was the special one. I thought that I was the only one. But it's obvious to me here, like after being away from you and now coming back, that you are doing the same thing with these girls. And he assured me that that was not what was happening. He was trying to convince me that it was important that now I'm older, so I'm probably out of his range of girls that he likes, that I need to start looking for other relationships, all of those things. And to me, it was like, wait a second, you were going to be here for the rest of my life. You were going to be like, that protective figure for me. And I just didn't know how to handle that. And I remember sitting on his couch crying. And I said to him, I can't live without you. For the last 6 years, pretty much 6 years, you have been the most important part of my life. And you're telling me now that you don't want to be a part of my life. And I said to him, if this is what you want, then I will go home to take care of a few things. And then I will end my life. And he said, well, you need to do what you need to do. And that moment, I started to get really uncomfortable. I still was, he still loved him like a fatherly figure. I still loved him in that sense. There was never this like boyfriend, girlfriend. I thought he was my boyfriend. That never dawned on me. So nonetheless, I just said to him, can you just make one promise to me? And he said, sure. And I said, just promise me that you'll come to my funeral. And he goes, absolutely. I would never miss it. And that was all it took. I went to bed that night, woke up the next morning. I ended up going home, and I got into the car with a friend of mine, who we weren't even really that good of friends. This is the funny part. We just had kind of met in a church group. And he was just picking me up to take me the rest of the leg home. And he knew something was wrong. And he reached out to me and asked me what was wrong. And I didn't want to tell him. Eventually, due to the fact that I was in that horrible emotional state, I eventually told him every single bit of the story from beginning to end. And to this day, it surprises me as I look back. I went through all those years and never once said a word. And then here I am in the car with some guy who was very safe. He was a kid. He was 19. He was the same age as me. And I'm spilling my story out. And I just said, but you got to promise me you're not going to tell. And he never, ever once said, I promise you, I'm not going to tell. He just said, you need to get this off your chest. You need to tell me what's going on. And I respect him to this day because he did what a lot of people couldn't have done. And he dropped me off at my house. He went back to the church and said, listen, this girl's being abused. You need to call the police. And the church's response was that, we'll take care of this internally. You know how internal investigations go. And thankfully, my friend was very persistent and insisted that they call the police. And he said, I'm not leaving here until you call the police, because he goes, I just dropped her off. She is suicidal. I know that we need to get her help and we need to get the police here. And he goes, we don't have much time, because he goes, if she knows that the police are here, that's just going to set her off. And he was just so wise for being 19,
Mm-hmm.
so that they did get the police. And I was kind of all of a sudden thrown into this world of, you've been abused. And I'm thinking, no, I've not been abused. And so within 6 to 8 months, I had gone through a trial. They had done their investigation. He has a written confession that he told the 3 pastors of the church that he was currently attending, and that he was teaching at, that he, did everything that I said he did. He then, so then at that point, they decided that, he was going to plead guilty. He pled guilty. He was convicted on 2 misdemeanor counts. One was endangering the welfare of a child. The other one was corrupting the morals of a minor. He had all of the felony charges dropped because I was of the legal age of 16, which happened on my birthday. So because I was 16 on that day, he was able to drop all felony charges. So he was told going into the sentencing hearing he would get 5 years probation. And when we got into the sentencing hearing, that's what I was expecting. That's what the DA was telling me. And I gave my victim impact statement, and he was given an opportunity to, I guess, give like a defense statement, is what they call it, I guess. And he rattled off that he wanted the judge to know that he never forced me to do anything, that, at times I came on to him. He was just, I mean, I just stood there with my mouth open, because you got to understand there was still emotional connection between him and I. And I could not believe what he was saying. And I kept looking at the DA like, aren't you going to stop him? And he's like, no. He goes, we'll just let him talk. And so he talked for a while, but the judge had enough. And the judge shut him up and basically said that he was insulting him, and that this was his words. He goes, I don't care if she pranced herself naked across your desk. You are in a responsible position, not only as a teacher, but as a Bible teacher, as a church leader, to take her by the arm and take her to where she should have been. But you didn't do that. You took advantage of her. And basically told him that he was done talking, and ended up sentencing him that day to 11 and a half to 24 months in county prison. He served 11 and a half months in prison. He was released on parole for 12 for the rest of the duration. He got a job as a manager for a Bible bookstore in the mall, in one of the local malls. Why this even happened is a tragedy all in of itself, but he was the manager of 5 underage teenage girls. I mean, seriously, he's on probation. He is on probation for a crime. And he's literally the manager of 5 underage 16-year-old girls. And at the time, I didn't know that. I just knew he was on probation. He was done probation. He moved to Vermont. Never heard anything up from him for quite a few years. I was on Google one day, and, just like anything, I thought, this is a good age where everybody can be found. I wonder what he's up to. And so I couldn't find him anywhere. He had like 0 social media presence. And to me, that was like really odd, because you can't hide on social media. I mean, you don't have to be on social media sites, but you can't hide. So to be that like gone, to me, there was something going on. So being the little bit of a private eye that I like to be, I just kept digging, and I ended up finding an obituary for someone's funeral that he did. And it linked him to the church, and it linked him to his name and where he was. And so sure enough, I went on to the church website, and underneath Meet the Pastor, there he was, sitting there smiling as if the world had, been all wonderful, and he had made it to the pastoring position. And I was just shocked. I thought, how could this happen? Like, he has a criminal background, even though he didn't go to jail for long, even though he did not get on Megan's offenders list, because he didn't get charged for the felonies, he still had a criminal record. So anybody who would have done a background check would have known that. So I just reached out to the former pastor of the church, one of the former pastors. I don't know where he kind of fit in, but he was one of the former pastors. He gave me 10 names of people in that church and their emails. I sent them an email. It was a very brief email. It said, FYI, I didn't know if you knew this. And I connected to it the only 2 small Google articles that were left still on Google. And I sent it off. Never heard from one person in that church. Nobody, nothing, not a reach out, not like, can you tell me your story? Can you tell me what's going on? We'd like to hear your side. Nothing. About a month into it, I got this nasty nasty, nasty direct message on Facebook from some Mike Adams, who now, after now going through everything that I went through, doesn't exist, or nobody knows who he is. So he was just some random person that wrote this very nasty email saying that basically that they were going to sue me if I continued to pursue him. So at that time, I just stopped because I was scared. I mean, I don't want to get pursued at that time. And, you know, there's another aspect, if you don't mind, if I just kind of put in here,
Sure.
Because this is something that he tries to use against me, and I need to make it, I would like a chance to just be able to speak it myself. And there was a point where after I had my third son, I had two daughters, and then I had a son, and I was pregnant with my son, and I had my two youngest, and I have all my kids were within like 4 or 5 years of, you know, all of them are very close. And there was a point while being pregnant and in between having two girls that I realized, oh my word, I'm raising girls. Oh my word, like I can't protect these girls. Like all of a sudden, like the trauma came back. And I started getting this intense paranoid that he was following us around. Now, if there was a picture of him to see, which you will see eventually if you watch the Dr. Oz show, you'll see he's a very common looking man, bald man, mustache. And so my paranoid behavior got me to the point where I was like, I don't know what to do. I didn't want to tell my husband because I didn't want him to think that, like, you know, what did am I enticing this guy back? What was the deal? So I decided that I was just going to call the police and I was going to like report him, that he's following me around. So I did. And they did an investigation and found out that there was no way that he could have been in Pennsylvania. And they came back to me and said, you know, you're lying to us. And I'm like, no, I've seen him. And then they're like, no, you're lying to us. And I'm like, no, listen, like, and then they showed me like ways that they were able to prove that he wasn't here. And I said, okay, fine, I'm lying to you, but like, I really believe I saw him. And so I ended up getting charged. I ended up getting charged for filing a false police report. And my husband and my therapist at the time went to the court and said, listen, like, this is all PTS syndrome. Like, this is all very normal. Like, she has two little girls now, you know, she's worried. She's, you know, also pregnant and hormonal. So they said, this is very, I had documentation from all my therapists saying this is just regular PTSD symptoms, and they would not drop the charges. So I ended up getting arrested and I had probation for a year. And I got charged for filing the false police report. I pled guilty to it. I did it, whatever. I didn't really care at that point. And then it was expunged off my record because, you know, I'm not a hardened criminal. I made it for a year without doing anything horrible. I just brought that into the story for a reason. And the reason is that he tries to use that as being like, look, she's like coming after me. She's being a predator. It wasn't that at all. I really don't care. It was the fact that I was concerned for the safety of my children in just normal trauma fear.
Right.
So I put that in there just to say, because he uses it against me all the time.
Right.
But anyway,
Absolutely.
so that's kind of where we are. I then 5 years, just in October, had the Wartburg Watch, the blogger. Her name is Dee Parsons. She connected with me and decided that she wanted to tell my story. She warned me that this was not just like a blog. This was a very well followed blog. And I was like, okay, it's a blog. How many people follow a blog? You know, like 7 people, 100 people maybe. And she's like, no, listen, like, I got to let you know that this is going to be on Google page 1. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So she told my story. She gave me full warning. I love the woman for it. And my story went out there. And I'm telling you, my life has not been the same since that article left her computer. I mean, people have just, I mean, the fact that he's been convicted, the fact that that he confessed, the fact that I have paperwork to show all this, and yet he still continues to be a pastor at this church. I reached out to a woman at the time that was affiliated with the church. I didn't know her. I just reached out to her and said, did you know this about your pastor? And because of her bravery, and I want to say it as bravery because she was one of the only people in that church that did her homework, researched everything I sent. She did not believe me at first, but she didn't give up. She kept researching. She kept going back. She was looking for the articles. She was looking for in his past. She was doing her homework and realized there's something wrong with this guy. And she hightailed it out of there and took her granddaughter out of there. And I am so eternally grateful for that woman because she changed the whole dynamic of this. Because now the church had to know, because she made him go up there in front of the church and make a statement. And so now the church had, every person that was in the body of the church at that moment knew that he was convicted. Now, of course, his dialogue was, of course, that he was he was forced by his lawyer, the detectives are lying, everything like that. But the fact is, at this point now, the church had a decision to make. In the days since, the church has decided to stand next to him. He still preaches every Sunday. His elder, Don Wood, literally said in the Burlington Free Press, which you can read online, that even if you would have known this about him, he still would have hired him for the position. So to me as a victim, that hurt. That was tough. But I thought to myself, you know what? This is a problem and I'm not going to be quiet anymore. You have just opened a can of worms that you will never be able to put back. And here I am, just trying to get my story out, trying to get people to understand that you cannot just blindly believe people who look like in front of you as great men of God and get up and preach this incredible message and believe that he's actually, like, that his private life is just as good as whatever he can portray in public. And that's my story. That's my message, is that, like, listen, like, they never did a background check on this man. They never went back and looked at any of his references from where he was. They just blindly let the man go take in this position. And then now that church stands firm and has their feet planted there's no, they said in their investigation, which I find funny because I still have heard from nobody in that church, except for the one woman, that they found that my accusations were unfounded. Wait. Wow. How can they be unfounded? The court of law, like, convicted him. So that's where we are now. And that's why I'm here. That's why I've been a voice as best as I can to just let people know one thing: don't leave your stinking brains at the door when you walk into a church. Do not leave them at the door, because that's what a lot of these churches are doing. They think that you just blindly believe the man who's from God. You leave your brain at the door and you just trust blindly. And this is what happens.
Right.
And it's time to make a reform to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'll ask you this, Kelly. I want to go back to the first part of your story. You said originally that you were 14 years old when this man started grooming you, and groomed you for 2 years until you reached, at that time, 16 was the age of consent. That's when he acted out on this, when he could say, well, it was consensual now.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, what are some of the things that he did in order to groom you for this relationship? You know, how did that kind of sweet talking and things, you know, those kind of things start working? Because I think there's a lot of people out here who have children possibly around that age. You know, you've got 12, 13, 14-year-old children. These are some of the things that you need to hear out there. You need to hear that possibly you taking your daughter, even maybe son, to a church, and you're believing that this pastor is supposed to be some way, or this priest is supposed to be one way. What are some of the things that you witnessed or you went through that you could say for sure, hey, this is grooming somebody to possibly have this type of thing done to them?
Right. Yeah, I have I can definitely tell you that. And I really want people to listen to this because this isn't crucial. These guys get a thrill out of being blunt and bold right in front of your eyes. It's a magic trick to them to be able to do stuff and you never even notice. And so one of the couple of the things that he would do that were that realize now as an adult going back and looking is like, why did he need to counsel me into a dark classroom? Like why was he always like pulling me away from being in a public setting? Why was, that to me at the time was like, oh, he just wants to give, like, he just wants to be confidential. But in reality, looking back, it was very purposeful.
Okay. So
A lot of times,
counseling alone, basically, and he's a male figure. Really, there should have been a female figure there with him in that room.
absolutely, there at least nonetheless that he was confronted many times about his counseling practices at the school, and he chose to just continue to not conform to what they asked, keeping doors open, not being in the dark, staying at least so that people when they're walking by can see us visually. That never happened. He always was pushing us back into a corner because you can't do anything if you're not back in the corner. You know what I mean? Like those things. A couple things that I really think are important to tell you is at the time he had a young son, and here are the things that they do that you will miss unless you know. And he would like take his son from me, and as he was doing that, he would rub across my chest and like be, fondling me and doing all that stuff. But it looked like he was just taking his child from my arms. And he was doing it in front of my family. He was doing it in front of people. He was doing it in front of people. And no one ever once thought, that was kind of strange. And it was happening all the time. So they'll use whatever they can to cover, to actually do it and to be bold about it, because then it just makes you, that person, that much more confused if somebody would come out with an allegation.
Right. So basically,
yeah, so
visual unintentional groping basically is what I'm kind of putting that as.
Yes. Feel like always getting up really close to me when he was erect, and you could feel like his hard penis on my back, rubbing my shoulders. At times, I mean, I even remember sitting at a computer one time, and he always stood on the opposite side. Okay, this is taking me back a little, but we had towers and floppy disks and all that kind of stuff, and he'd always stand on the opposite side and reach over, and many times reached his hand down into my shirt, and no one ever noticed a word. No one ever said a thing. No one ever, boldly in front of people on the other side of the computers. And it's just those little things that like are happening right under people's eyes, but we're missing them. And my thing is that if you have that weird feeling that something just isn't right, you don't have to go in and accuse the man of anything, but you have the right to take your child and protect them and pull them out of the situation and just say, you know what, whether you're doing anything or not, you will not counsel my child. You know what I mean? And honestly, I don't blame my parents in any way. They did what they trusted him. He won over their affection. And now I'm here to say, all right, parents, let's not be dumb anymore. Let's put our heads back in our brains and let's be smart, because your kid's life is at danger.
Exactly. And I know Bud was chomping at the bit and agreeing with you when you said that, because he always tells me this, and I know he's about to take off with it. Go ahead, Bud.
Well, I know what Jay's thinking. Always trust your gut. Always. If it doesn't feel right, it isn't. And what we see here too is these pieces of garbage, these predators. That's exactly what they are, garbage. And they hone in. It doesn't surprise me you talking about your emotional vulnerability back then. They're predators. That's what they focus on. They focus on the weak, the confused, and they'll take that position of power and trust. And it's just like she talked about the times of the things he would do. Part of the thrill for these scumbags is doing it right in front of people brazenly.
Yeah.
And also, it's like if you move a desk a little bit throughout the day, by the end of the day, it's all the way across the room, but you don't really totally notice it along the way. and then all of a sudden it's there. For someone like you, and that's what they do, they'll slowly, until all of a sudden you realize, wow, how did it get here? And to see how you're going to react. That's why these people do that too, and that's why they do it slowly, as opposed to
2 years it took them.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon for these scumbags to do this. And so use your head, and we go back to trusting your gut. If something doesn't feel right, it's not right, period. And you have every right who you have in and out of your life. So again, parents out there, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of these people will use that trust, as we said, and they'll use the vulnerabilities of their victims. And they're predators, plain and simple. It's disgusting. And I'm so sorry that you experienced that, but the guts you have to come on here and talk about it, there's no way it's not going to help some people out there. I applaud you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the only thing that keeps me going, because honestly, I just, this isn't easy stuff to do. It isn't easy to sit and tell the world that you were, these sexual things happen to you. I'm not out. I don't have any, what do I need? I have everything that I need. I don't want the man's money. I don't want anything. There's nothing I want from him. I want to be able to protect other kids, because as we can see in the news, it's not getting any better. It's getting worse.
Yep, that's 100% correct. And I think that, I think that you're so brave for coming out and talking about this, and especially when this guy is still out there, still a pastor, still doing this possibly to children. And what we call our network is the Future of Our Children's Video Network for a reason, is that we are advocates, number one, for the children. Do we help parents going through these struggles that they go through with the family court and DCF? Absolutely, but the children always come first. And their protection is paramount for us. And I know that Randy Davis agrees with me, and I'm sure he'd want to say something to you as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something, Kelly. Sometimes things happen to give a person validation and in what they're thinking, and it's an affirmation from the Creator. But your story, I have to tell you a little bit, and tonight it's like everything tied together. And what I'm about to say are some things nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody's heard me say on here before, but everything you're saying just brought up really what started driving me in advocacy and looking into things, which tonight we've got Chief George McDowell. He's watching from South Carolina. He's the chief of the Croatan Indians of South Carolina. I am the chief of the Croatan Indians of Sampson County, North Carolina. Why that matters is because in 1925, on October 25th of 1925, there was a posse put out to try and capture my grandfather. My grandfather was Jonah Emanuel. And Grandpa Jonah was a chief, and they ran a subscription school for Croatan Indian children. And back then it was segregated, but here's where it goes. There was, and this goes to the point of people in power, men in power. There was what was known as a constable back then. And a constable at that time, basically they were like a sheriff. They just ran around, and if they wanted to get you, they'd just make something up and have 6 of their friends as the jury at the local store or whatever and make it up. Well, this constable, Grandpa Jonah, who was also a pastor, he was a pastor. The school was the Sunday school, and it was a farm where people sent their kids there. And everybody there, there were girls there, there were little boys there, but Grandpa Jonah had a heart for children. So this guy, his name was Black Stewart, and he would come around, and he was caught. He'd get liquored up, and because of his power, I mean, it was like the Wild West here. But he was peeking in on little girls. In other words, he was up to no good. And Grandpa Jonah told him in front of some men, he said, I know what you've done. And if I catch you down there again, because Grandpa Jonah was a shepherd to these little kids, especially the little girls. He said, if I catch you there again, I'm going to kill you. And he meant it. He's talking to the law now. He's talking to it, but it was like the Wild West. Well, evidently, he caught him there again. And after he put out that threat, they tried to ambush my grandfather. And they called him a Croatan Indian outlaw because he shot him in the face with a shotgun and killed him right there. The other two ran. They ended up taking Grandpa Jonah's land and everything, but the church, which is Shiloh, is still in existence. They never caught my grandfather, but they took his land through civil actions and so forth. And that brings it to a current day. A few years ago, there was a little girl who was my ex-wife's daughter, and I had guardianship. And we fished tournaments. She was 11, 12 years old. And there were guys that I fished with, and they're like, hey, let's have her go. She can do the young angler and everything else. I didn't pay it any attention. I like these guys. We won tournaments together. We fished offshore. Well, something just felt funny. And sometimes the little girl would say, well, I'm going to stay at home. You guys go to church. So we'd go to church, come back. Everything was fine, but something felt funny. Started looking into emails. And this guy, who was supposedly my friend, had then started going to the same church that we went to. This is the same church that my grandfather built now. I'm not kidding you. And so we dug into the emails. And when we did, we saw things where he's talking to her. There's nothing overtly sexual, but he's saying, you were heaven sent. You are my angel. I wish you were my daughter. There were a bunch of emails. Okay. So we sat her down and questioned her. And then finally she said, oh, he's bought me four-wheelers. And he was married, but they had no kids. Come to find out, there were times when she had spent the night with him and his wife, but he and her had went up to Yohari Game Lands and rode four-wheelers. He told her he bought her four-wheelers, but they were only there. It was like driving a wedge between the little girl's mother and I and her. And so I went to the church that my grandparents built, Croatan Indian Church, Shiloh. And I met with the deacons and the elders, and I presented them with the emails. I didn't tell them that I'd already been to the detectives. And the detectives had told me, sir, what you're looking at. I said, well, there's nothing in here that really says anything about sexual things or anything like that. They said, no, but this is called grooming. I'd never heard the word grooming in my life. And this female detective said, I can tell you this is a pedophile. This is a man who is grooming her, and he's doing it slowly. Come to find out, he had given her money, like $500. And when she'd stay at home sick, when we went to church, he was picking her up at the end of the driveway. They were riding around. Allegedly, nothing ever happened. But when I went to these elders and the pastor at that time, I said, look, here is the evidence. And the reason I went to them is because they called me. And they called me because they said, look, Brother Davis, I know, your family built the church. Everybody knows you here. You're a good member. I said, yeah. They said, but did you tell Brother so-and-so that you were going to shoot him in the head? I said, well, here's what I told him. I told him that I was on to him and that I would put a sunroof right in the top of his head if I ever caught him near one of my children or anybody God put me as a shepherd before. And I said, now, the detectives have told me he's grooming them and everything else. Their words to me were, well, brother, the thing is, he hasn't done it yet, and he's not been convicted yet. I said, well, let me explain a little something to you, and this will go to the heart of it, Kelly. In the Bible, since we're talking about a biblical issue here and a scriptural thing with churches, King David was a shepherd. He was a shepherd over his father's sheep. And what a shepherd would do at night, because wolves and predators would get after the sheep, what he would do is he would put them into a cave, and a shepherd would sit at the mouth of that cave. He would protect those sheep from anything getting in there. That's what a shepherd does. He protects. Well, they also have what was called a hireling. In the Bible, they had a hireling. So instead of you being the shepherd of your father's sheep, you are paid as a hireling to be a shepherd of someone else's sheep. They're not really your sheep. You're just a paid hireling. So when you get pastors or elders who don't try and protect, they're hirelings. What a hireling does is he calls all the sheep to the cave, but the hireling goes to the back of the cave, and the sheep are all in the cave in front of him, between him and the wolves.
Yep.
That's what a hireling does. He doesn't have a heart for it. He's not shepherding. He's not protecting the flock. He just lets the wolf come, and the wolf can kill 2 or 3 sheep before he can even do anything, if he even does anything. He uses the sheep as a buffer between him and the danger that's coming. So what happened to you should never have happened to you. And I know you say, well, the people never saw what he was doing. They never saw the grooming. My bet is they did. If they did not, and they are calling themselves deacons and elders and leaders of a church, then they have no discernment. They have no business being in there. They have no wisdom from the Creator to put them in a position like that. And they're just in the way. And they're helping and aiding and abetting a predator to do what it is they do. That being said, that's why Neil Shelton, all of us, Bud Vino, Jay Moss, that's why we do what we do. This is about protecting the children. You know, when we were little, I used to watch Adam 12, the cop show, and on the doors of all the cop cars, it said to protect and serve. That's what it said on the cop card. If you go to the police now, it's about investigating the body, investigating the crime that's already happened. And I can tell you that even though that is my family church, and it's a mile down the road, all my ancestors are buried there. My burial plot is there. We gave the land for the church, built the church. But from the moment they told me, well, you know, once something happens, we'll do anything, I gave them the same speech I just gave here about a hireling. And I said, let me just explain something to y'all. These people, you're bringing in for numbers. You're bringing in for whatever purpose. You're bringing in to make yourself feel better, but numbers are not the key. You can't bring in wolves in sheep's clothing and have it hurt everybody in here. And I have not since stepped foot back in the church that my own family did, simply because there was no leadership there. There was nobody there to do what the lady you're talking about, the grandmother who took her kids and left. That's what everybody in that church should have done. They should have stood behind you and said, you know what, forgiveness is one thing. That's for him and his maker. And he can be judged, and he will be judged for what he did to you. But the rest of the people in there, what they don't realize is for them to know this is going on and went on, and this man is guilty and convicted, and to allow him in there, that is to make them just as guilty as they are. That the key is what you did in my show on the network is called The Watchman. The reason it comes out of Ezekiel. In Ezekiel 33, you'll see where the watchman is on the wall. He's got a trumpet. If he see danger coming against the people, and he has to blow his trumpet, and he alerts them. Now, what you did, Kelly, is you alerted the people. You did what the watchman does. You alerted the people. If the watchman doesn't blow the trumpet, the blood is on his hands should danger fall and harm fall upon those inside the gates. But if you blow the trumpet, they hear the trumpet and they don't do anything to stop the danger, then the blood is on their hands. Their hands are bloody in your case right now, because you know, and I know, and this is something Jay talked about a little bit earlier. There are groups out here right now who are actually accepting of pedophiles, convicted pedophiles, some of them convicted in North Carolina, who served 10 years, and they pled guilty and went to 10-year sentences. And some of these other advocacy groups, P4P, Francesca Amata Banfield, and the rest of them, even attorney, Connie Regley, they are so hell-bent on numbers on, hey, they've got numbers, let me get numbers, that they are supportive of people who have been convicted of pedophilia. And in America today, we've slipped so far that we can wait till babies are born and kill them. We can support people that want to destroy the United States and destroy children. We can now normalize pedophilia. We can normalize statutory rape, which is what is happening in your situation. And the worst part is the churches, and it doesn't matter what denomination it is. These are people of power. Nope. These are people in authoritative positions where they've got you. You're a captive audience. And then, like yourself, they go after somebody who is already wounded. They can see that you've been wounded before. You've got certain issues going on that they see as a weakness, and they exploit it. And then the people that are tithing and funding it and supporting it just close their eyes. This is sick. This is sick. So I salute you for what it is you're doing. And, if it doesn't help anybody of the thousands that are listening except me, just know it validated everything that I've been after for a long time. So I thank you very much for being here and being so brave and courageous.
Yeah, Bud, go ahead.
Well, I just have to say again, Allison and I, my wife and I, were talking to Kelly, like I said, before we had you on. And I, having children myself, and even if I didn't, to take advantage of the purest of the pure, of children, of people, especially, it doesn't matter, but especially when you're in a position of trust and power, it's the most deplorable, disgusting, vile. There aren't enough superlatives for me to use. And for me, it's just like a dog with rabies. I'm sorry. That you're wired wrong. If you can look at an innocent child or of any age of a child and look and try and figure out a way to take advantage and exploit that child, you are the definition of a weak piece of shit. I'm sorry, Jay Mott. That's I can't even. And I got to tell one thing too, Jay, for the people out there, as Kelly said, use your head. If you've got a daughter or a son or a child, there is no case ever where it's appropriate for an adult to be saying, hey, you look really pretty, or look out for that stuff. Mm-hmm. There's no reason where there'd ever be a case where I would email one of Jay Moss's kids and tell them to look pretty or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Why? Because it's not normal. You got to look for those things. And the hardest thing for people to do when it's people in positions of trust, and I read a story today where a child, I forget who posted it. It might have been our friend Jackie out there. I can't remember. It could have been MJ, but it was something to the effect of this child had finally spoke up, and it was in reference to the same sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was the father smacked the kid upside the head and said, don't you ever talk about the father like that again. Mm. And so that's I like to think extreme case. I don't think it's as extreme as we wish it were. I think that probably happens a lot, especially in years past. But things like that, even the things that seem small, they're not small. Think of common sense. Is there ever a reason where this person should be saying this? And sometimes just use your head. There isn't. It's never, certain things are never appropriate with children. And again, use your head to take that position and violate it is the lowest of the low.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that irks me from my standpoint, being a former chaplain's assistant in the United States Army, is anyone hiding behind the cloth. You are not only sick for the acts that you have committed, but you will be held responsible for what you do for your flock, either good or bad. And honestly, we've had the Boston Globe has put out a big, huge report in the past about priests in the Boston area. That was a big bust. The Chicago area as well. That was a big bust. And the LA area as well. That was a huge bust. It is a ring of people who are doing this, who are pedophiles that are joining the church under the reference of God and harming children. And I think that it's sick, it's wrong, and I think that churches need to take a very big action in how they vet and how they go through the process of hiring either a pastor or a priest that is anywhere near a child in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, you should be doing your vetting like it was the freaking FBI, honestly, or worse.
And if you've done nothing wrong, you can vet. Like when I do things for my school, my kid, they want me to do 15 things for to prove that I've done nothing wrong in my life. I'm more than happy to do that.
Mhm.
If you start somebody who's starting to kind of give you some resistance as to why you're trying to look into their background, that's a red flag to me. That you know, we're just protecting. We're protecting you. We're protecting the children. We're protecting you. I mean, we're protecting even the adult in the situation, so that we've done our job. But
Right.
you're right. It's a sick thing to believe that that these people can go into the church, but they're going into the church because the church will
They will
forgive.
protect its own. They
Yeah,
will
and they'll
protect their own.
forgive with, like, God says we're supposed to forgive, so let's just forgive and move on. No,
Well,
you can't do
no,
that. That's a free
no.
ticket for that person to go right back to what he was doing.
Yeah, forgiveness, when you are a victim of this, forgiveness is for yourself, not for the other party. That is the most atrocious thing to say, is you have to forgive. Forgiveness comes in one's own time. And that is a process that could take years. It could take decades for somebody to forgive somebody for what they have done. But that forgiveness is always for yourself. It's not for the other party. And I hate to say that, but it's absolutely true. But I want to get on also the fact that you were arrested because you reported this guy because you felt as if you were being followed while you obviously were pregnant. I mean, you could have been having hormonal imbalances anyways, but then on top of that, you have the PTSD. Obviously, when you've talked to this guy after you had been away from him a while, that really expresses to me that you may or may not have had what is referred to as Stockholm syndrome. That really irks me as a person who has dealt with people with PTSD for years, literally decades. I've dealt with people and talked to people and have experienced PTSD of my own. And I can tell you for a simple fact, I think anyone in law enforcement who is holding you responsible for something that you obviously had a PTSD issue, you were obviously having flashbacks or felt like you were being followed, something wasn't right, and that could have been the protective instinct that you had as a parent. I think that is absolutely atrocious. I mean, if you don't want to take the report, that's one thing. I get that. But charging somebody for falsely believing that they were accused, that they were accusing their former predator, I think that that's wrong.
I mean, it wasn't like I was an accusation. It was a convicted predator. And that's
Yes.
what my therapist had tried to explain to these officers. My husband, who is my biggest advocate and my best friend, he tried to say to this guy, listen, like, you do not know what she's been through. You do not know the pain and the heartache that we live with. And it was just, I inconvenienced him more than anything, because he had to do that entire investigation and found out that I was wrong, that I was wrong. And I remember looking at him and saying to him, I really didn't lie on purpose. And he said, but you lied. And I said, I guess you're right. And that's, at that point, it was like, what was I going to say? I mean, they had proof that he wasn't there.
Well, right. I mean, and this is the thing that I get across to. Once someone has become a predator of someone, if they want to become that predator and be that predator again, even though they've been falsely or even though they've been truly convicted of a crime, if they really wanted to pursue that further, it's very easy to come up with alibis. Very, very easy to come up with alibis. Oh, I was on camera here. Okay, yeah, but you could have recorded that. It's very easy to do some of those things sometimes as well. So is it not? We don't know for a fact, but you do the investigation. That's why you do investigations, and you find out if it is true or if it's not true. And if it's not true, hey, you made a mistake. You thought somebody was following you that may not have been that guy, but he looked like that guy. So those kind of things do happen. But I mean, the other thing that I get across as well too is there are plenty of people, and I want to explain this real quickly as we're getting in here to our second hour. I think that a lot of people need to understand that you are a true victim of this. But here's the thing. You could have 10 people who say, hey, I was sexually assaulted. And let's say out of those 10 people, one person makes a false allegation and it's proven that that was a false allegation. What happens is the rest of those 9 get confronted as being false accusers as well. And I think that it's imperative to know that you need to vet people's stories. You need to find out what is actually going on behind the scenes on some of these stories, because it could be that there's somebody out there who pretends to be just like you, or just like me, or just like Bud, or just like Randy. And they could be out there and they could say, hey, I'm just like these people. But when you dig into their case and you find out that's not true at all. And in fact, they had been prosecuted under law, under the pretext of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's very important. That means that there is no doubt in a jury or a judge's mind that that person did something. Okay? It isn't one of these, oh, well, he could have. No, he did. And this gentleman, just as well as the pedophile that we had in the past that Randy was talking about, fully admitted to doing these things. Fully admitted to doing these things. And my question to you also is, 16 years old, the legal consent, I think that's atrocious. what can a 16-year-old really, I don't think they have any fair thinking in their mind of how their life is going to be once they turn 40 years old or whatever it may be, on how the rest of their life is going to go if they are groomed for 2 years while not being of that legal consent, and then 16 years old possibly having a child with someone who's 30 or 40 years old. What do you think on that?
Just putting it in this sense is that we're not even letting our kids drive cars anymore, right at 16. We're making sure that they put in we're not going to trust our kids behind a car, but we're going to trust them to make an emotional and a life-changing decision and say that it's legal. And the fact is that there's many states pushing to push that back even further, like to say that, legal age of consent is, 12. I've even heard in the UK that they want to make the legal age of consent like 4, like the age of 4. Like, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, no 4-year-old can make a decision like that. But what we're trying to do in America and what we're trying to do in the world is to just say, well, you know what? These people just have, just some kind of need for children. So let's just, like you said in the beginning, let's just normalize it. And
yeah.
and that's detrimental to your
right.
It's what's happening to our society, and it's
Yes, I agree. And I want to ask you one more thing before we leave, because I know that it's been surfacing around the movement. There is a TEDx program in which they invited a woman to come on as a psychological evaluator and try to put up the persuasion that being a pedophile is a sexual choice. Mm-hmm. How would you feel about your daughters being around someone who was a pedophile because it was their sexual choice?
I don't let my daughters go around hardly anybody at this point. There's, I'm sorry, no, but the problem is that we're letting so many things, the world is doing exactly what my abuser did, pushing the boundaries, pushing them. And now we're into extreme. And at this point, no, like it's crazy. Who is protecting our kids anymore? Nobody. And I hate, I just, it's sad. It's sad that we have to, that we have to, that I have to worry every single day I send my children off to school that they're going to be in a safe environment. I mean, that's hard for me every day because that's where I was abused.
Exactly.
And look, Jay, that TEDx thing, number one, it wasn't that it was a sexual choice. I watched that crazy woman, just whatever she is, 3 times to make sure I got it. And what she was saying was that pedophiles don't have a choice. That's their sexual orientation. They can't help it. Okay, I'll agree with that. If they're born with that, whatever is going on in there, then they are going to be a predator for life. They're not going to change, but they need to be kept away from children and they need to be labeled as such. They need to have it on their driver's license. They need to have a big red star on their door so everybody knows, hey, this guy can't help it. If you let your kid go over there or the baseball goes across the fence, he's going to be over there taking pictures and showing his wiener to him because he can't help it. There's something wrong with this guy. Now, that being said, look, there is so much of this, Kelly, that's going on in North Carolina right now. They've got a new bill that's being promoted. This is a bill to get teachers to start evaluating the mental health of children in schools. In other words, to bring in services a teacher believes that a child should have. And what we're witnessing in America is you're witnessing a cradle to grave mentality where there are some in politics and in power who feel that teachers, social workers, aka government agents, should better equipped to understand and do the hard work of parenting other than a parent. And that is just wrong. And like you said, they're trying to lower the age of consent to all the way down to 4, some states down to 12. They're legalizing what my forefathers as Croatan Indians would call perversion. This is perverted Sodom and Gomorrah stuff that's now being normalized in our society. And I don't know that there's a way to turn it around without just all hell breaking loose, because there's so many people that just feel, you know what, I send my kids to school. And this is another thing. Why would teachers be in charge of doing this when, if you're looking, all these teachers they're doing the same thing in the schools as happened to you in the church. You've got teachers, and for whatever reason, it used to be whenever I was growing up, if you saw something come out and there was somebody that had sex with a student, it was generally a male with a female student. And now the majority of them are females with male students. I mean, you're looking at some of the craziest stuff. And then for whatever reason, society is like, oh, yeah, but look, she's a hot teacher. I wish I'd had a teacher that hot. It's almost as though, well, little boys don't matter. You know, being molested by an adult and being taken advantage of, basically raped by an adult, if you're a little boy, it's okay. Now, if you're a little girl, we're going to hang you. But don't you think, too, we're not seeing the ones where it's a female on female? Don't you think we're not seeing the ones where it's male on male? Because those are popping out. But it's like the whole of society has become so perverted and accepting of it that you can just run around. And then, God forbid, there was a story that hit today where there was a social worker, and this social worker had been convicted before of things, but he's a social worker. He's running around out here making decisions for other people's kids. I'm telling you right now, and I don't want to leave things on a bad note, because there's another thing you need to know, Kelly. In Pennsylvania, there's a good friend you need to make there, and her name is Karen Wittes. She was on The Watchmen with me the other day. When she was 16 or 17, she had a stalker, a sexual guy who was stalking her. She liked him. It kind of groomed her. He ended up, at that age, he stabbed her in the chest over and over, strangled her,
times, yeah.
He was going to go to heaven with her, wrapped her in a sheet and put her under a bed and left her for dead. She had no blood pressure and went to her grandfather's, who was a World War II medic, who helped save her life. Her story is horrendous, but the reason I bring her up is because she's like you. She is courageous. She is strong. She has gotten before the Pennsylvania Senate Bill 123, Karen's Law, and it's about it's about very much what you're talking about, but it's about parole and how a victim shouldn't have to go before the parole board. The reason I bring her up is not only because of her strength being that like yours is, but also because this happened 25 years ago. 25 years ago. But she told us on the show, she said, nothing really happened until 2 years ago. So 23 years after it happened, she started going before legislators. She started getting the law there. She started making the changes. She's now been interviewed by Ron Goldman's sister, the one who was killed by OJ, yep, and also Chris Hansen. Now she's got a Senate bill that's already passed the Senate in Pennsylvania, and she's a strong person that would be a good networking possibility for you. She is a strong woman, a strong advocate, and she only found her voice 2 years ago, 23 years after it happened. So I just want to commend you. Better now that everything is coming out, and she's saying the same things like you are. You got Dr. Oz coming up. You're on here. You had the one blog that went wild out there, and everybody found out about it. My question to you, I guess, would be, what do you tell the people? Because we have a lot of people who are fighting for one cause or another cause, and inequities in the justice system. But what do you say to the people that are out there and they're like, well, I'm just one person. I'm a nobody. Nobody knows me. My story's not that big. Nobody's gonna help me. What do you say to them to get them off the couch and get them motivated to take action? What would you say to them right now?
This is a question I actually really, really appreciate that you even asked, because I was that person. I was that person 6-8 months ago. Before this blog took my story, I thought it's not significant. Like, it's not a mega church. It's just a little church. It's, my story, it was 22 years ago. Nobody cares. And I realized that through the power of meeting people like Dee Parsons from the Wartburg Watch, and Jimmy Hinton, who turned his own father in, people like that who told me that, no, you use your voice. And you know what, like, a lot of my voice and my platform started on Twitter and started on Facebook, and I just started speaking. And it's funny because that is still something I still struggle with, is my story that significant? Is my story really going to make a difference? And I'm starting to see that, you know what, it is making a difference. And I am doing everything I can to be able to protect children, because this is not fair to live like this. I know many great and wonderful survivors, and the life that we all live and the struggles that we have are just so unfair and so nasty and so miserable. And to think that it was done by adults that had no care for like you said, pure children. And so yeah, your voice does matter. And I try to go on Twitter every once in a while and do like a live Twitter and just say, listen, your voice matters. And sometimes you just need to let people know that they matter. And it's amazing what happens, because Dee Parsons from the Wartburg Watch looked at me and said, your story matters.
Yeah.
And that broke open for me the idea of where I'm at now. And no matter how big your story is, how old your story is, how significant it means to you or not to you, somebody out there is going to have one similar. And you may be the only person they feel comfortable telling. And the sad part about it is there's so many people out there that just want to be heard. And that is that is the hardest part, is that that there's so many to be heard, and so few of us that are willing to listen. And we need more advocates, more people telling these people, I hear you, I believe you, um, I want to help you. One person can't do that. And
Right.
we're finding that as survivors get healing, that survivor can now become a support to the other survivors, and it's a growing operation. And it's the Church Too movement, the Me Too movement, are all survivors trying to build, because one person can't do it, because there's so many out there that need to be heard. And it's sometimes I lay in bed and cry, because I think of how many people really are out there that haven't said a word, does not have the privilege that I have to have a little platform to be able to talk. It's been freeing and healing for me, is to have people believe me, to have people like you say to me, like, hey, like, I hear you, I validate it. There's healing words in that, because so much of people, so many times people want to just discredit it, because they don't want to have to believe it.
Right, exactly. And I know we've kept you much longer than we said we were going to keep you here. So I'm going to go ahead and get down here to Bud. We're going to go ahead and thank you so much for coming on tonight. You did an amazing job. Like we said, This is a conversation among friends. The other people just get blessed to see it happen. So, and you did a fantastic job, just like everybody else. And I know Randy's going to have you say something right before we leave as normal here. But go ahead real quick.
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, Kelly, amazingly courageous you are. Amazingly. As you were speaking too, and when you first came on, I know for a lot of us, Jay, we get friended a lot and reached out to a lot in that community, the survivor community, sexual assault. To put yourself out there the way you've done, it's the most vulnerable thing. And it's quite honestly one of the strongest things that I can see when I see victims, because they're not victims anymore. The best thing you can do is live well. That's the best revenge, and grow from it. You're not responsible for what happened to you as a child, but you're responsible when you're an adult, how you live your life. So for you to come out, I was thinking as you were talking, I'm sure, and it is for Jay and I know for Randy on some level, the different things we do, it's therapeutic and somewhat cathartic. I know you'll see, I know sometimes it's overwhelming when you do certain shows or you put it all out there. It's emotionally overwhelming. And I know we always say there's someone out there that can relate on some level. And your voice does matter to the person out there going, it doesn't. Yes, it does. And when you get going, it's like sledding down a hill. When you start picking up pace and you start going faster and it's working, you go, wow, I am strong. I do matter. My voice is important. And it is. So Kelly, that being said, and let me just say too, when Jay was saying we kept you a while, what he was doing is saying, we apologize. So don't you apologize. We are honored to have you.
Yes.
And I'd love to have you on again. I know I can speak to those other gentlemen. Anything we can do. Unbelievable. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, because it validates my story and gives healing to me. And I can't say enough how much it means to me. But do me a favor. That's all I ask, is to do me a favor and just don't forget that there are people out there that still don't have a voice. And let's not forget about them, because they're important too.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Go ahead, Randy.
Well, two things, Karen. Number one, nobody understands a situation or takes any part in a situation until it happens to them, till it knocks on their door. Once it knocks on their door, all of a sudden, you've got either a victim or an advocate. All right. You're not a victim. You're an advocate. You're standing up. There's some victims that are they're not dead. They're just walking around dead. They're the walking dead. Whatever happened to them, they've let it take them to a dark place where they're just not themselves anymore. They're not going to fight out. They're just walking around waiting for their last breath. You didn't do that. You decided to fight back, speak out, and become an advocate. The number two thing on this is, if only one kid out there and one family out there hear your story and they avoid what you had to go through because they hear your story, nobody else on the earth but that family may not care. Everybody else may be like, it ain't no big deal. But to that kid who avoids what you had to go through, and to those parents who avoid what no parent would ever want to go through, that is worth all the money in the world. That is worth all the time and effort in the world. And I just applaud you for doing it. And believe me, this helped me a lot. This gave me validation. I know you feel validated, and I'm so glad to have known you here. And the one thing you have to do, though, is you got to say rev it up. And you got to mean it when you say rev it up. So we've got it on camera.
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I could do this.
You can do it.
Here, you do it first, and then I'll do it.
Okay, well, John Schneider did it, and he said, rev it up.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
I can't believe you're getting me to do this on TV.
Yeah, you're doing
Rev
it.
it up.
Yeah,
Hey, there we go.
Bo Duke. Bo Duke stinks. Bo Duke has nothing on you, Kelly.
That's right.
It's like you've been building that up.
Oh, I got a lot of things built up that I'd like to say. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We greatly appreciate you. And
Thank
we'll talk to
you.
you soon.
Thank you.
And look up
All
Karen
right,
with us.
thank you.
Yes.
Look up Karen's Law.
Yep.
Will do.
All right, here. So I'm going to go ahead and let her go here. Amazing first half of the show. Well, even a little bit longer than first half of the show because we had so many other things here. But obviously, we're going to have to move very, very quickly to get quite a few things going on in here. But I saw this amazing piece, and we'll talk about it just a little bit. I think it's only about 2 minutes and 53 seconds. So we'll play this real quick, and we'll talk about this as soon as we get back on this, as soon as I can get it to work.
American women are currently entitled to 12 weeks unpaid leave. American men are entitled to nothing. If the practical reality of pregnancy is another mouth to feed in your home, and America is a country where most people are living paycheck to paycheck, how does 12 weeks unpaid leave economically work? The truth is, for too many people, it doesn't. 1 in 4 American women go back to work 2 weeks after giving birth because they can't afford to take off any more time than that. That's 25% of American women. Equally disturbing, women who can afford to take a full 12 weeks often don't, because it'll mean incurring a motherhood penalty, meaning they will be perceived as less dedicated to their job and will be passed over for promotions and other career advancement. The deeper into the issue of paid parental leave I go, the clearer I see the connection between persisting barriers to women's full equality and empowerment and the need to redefine and in some cases destigmatize men's roles as caregivers. In other words, in order to liberate women, we need to liberate men. The assumption and common practice that women and girls look after the home and the family is a stubborn and very real stereotype that not only discriminates against women, but limits men's participation and connection within the family and society. These limitations have broad-ranging and significant effects for them and for the children. We know this. So why do we continue to undervalue fathers and overburden mothers? Whether or not you have or want kids, you will benefit by living in a more evolved world with policies not based on gender. We all benefit from living in a more compassionate time where our needs do not make us weak. They make us fully human. Maternity leave or any workplace policy based on gender can, at this moment in history, only ever be a gilded cage. Though it was created to make life easier for women, we now know it creates a perception of women as being inconvenient to the workplace. We now know it chains men to an emotionally limited path, and it cannot, by definition, serve the reality of a world in which there is more than one type of family. The whole world grows when people like you and me take a stand, because we know that beyond the idea of how men and women are different, there is a deeper truth, that love is love and parents are parents. Thank you.
And we are back on the Far From Lowell radio show, and I wanted to say a big thank you out there. We have already made a contact. I don't. My co-hosts don't know this yet. We have already made a contact with the PR person for Anne Hathaway. We will try and have her on. Obviously, that really has to work with her schedule, and she has about 6 different films coming out here shortly. So we'll see what we can do about getting her on the Far From Lowell radio show. But we have been in contact already. We would love to hear what she has to say, especially on this particular topic, because I think she did a fantastic job. I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Bud, and Randy did also discuss that.
Yeah, Jay, I'm glad you played that clip. As it was playing, I made sure Allison was paying attention too. And I know you enjoyed that clip. I think she said it beautifully. And I think she's right. She's right on the money. As I look through here, it's funny, Jay, because sometimes I'll grab my Bruce Lee book, look for things. I'll just randomly open it, Randy, and just see. And there's a whole section that I turned to. The first thing, it was on personal liberation. So, and it's funny that that's what we go into tonight, because that's the crux of it. And Randy, you spoke about it, becoming a victor, and as opposed to a victim. And again, to be able to spin it the way our guest has, Kelly, and for the people out there, use your voice. You have a voice. Use it. Use it. And if you're a victim that may be going through it right now, tell somebody that you trust. Talk. And if they don't listen, go to somebody else. Talk. Unfortunately, a lot of people are as we talked about, brushed off when they actually do work up the courage to say something. Right. And for the people that feel down and out right now, we see it all the time, Jake. People that feel like they're at the bottom, and we see people, Randy, come up all the time. And what I want to try and stress to people and implore to people is that things again change in an instant, Jay. And the things that you're experiencing now, what you have to do is look at them and say, you know what? Whatever you're experiencing that might be really tough, not everybody can go through that and make it to the other side. There's a reason. There's greatness on the other side. You're not going through all this for nothing. Don't make the pain for nothing. Do what Kelly's done. And we see the other advocates out there saying, you know what? Your mistake was trying to victimize me because I got a big mouth and I'm going to use it. So if you've experienced that, use your strength. You start to focus in on your strengths and the things that you're good at. Don't take it and let these people continually victimize you and waste your whole life, as Randy said, walking around in the dark. We've all got talent. And what these certain things, when you're victimized like this, will destroy your self-confidence. And that's why these people will do this. They want to do that. Don't leave as a shell. Don't leave as a shell. Fill back up, get back out there, and make the people that tried to victimize you regret the day they ever did. Okay? Exactly,
100%. And I'm going to get to Randy here in a second, and I'm going to say, I think, number one, Kelly did a fantastic job. Bud summed that up fantastically. Anne Hathaway bringing out an amazing charter to say that respecting women and women's ability to take maternity leave is also respecting a man's ability. We need to respect both abilities here. And what's so wrong with a man being emotional or sentimental or being a caregiver? There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with a woman in the workforce getting paid just as much as a man does. There's nothing wrong with either or. And I think equality, when you want to talk about equality, there's some group out here that has already come out and said they're not for 50-50 custody. And they're in this movement. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you even be in this movement? Because this movement is about equality. It's about both parents equally out here. It's about our God-given right to be parents and to love our children. Randy, I'm going to go over to you on this one because I know that there is that group out there that says some of those things, and it's very destructive,
Yeah, it's Francesca Amata Banfield. And let me tell you something, from everything that I see, the woman is trying to alienate her son from his father. He loves his father. And the woman has not only done that, because look, tonight's show is the perfect place to bring this out because there's a woman on here. We're standing up for the woman's rights on here because this is a woman, Frances Amata Banfield, who's going to come out and say, oh, look, they're just men's rights. But how can you do that when every one of the previous shows recently have been about women or women's issues? So you can't just come out and say that. So let's just dispel that rumor and that nasty thing from that hag right now. Number two, the whole thing about this other group, they're protecting pedophiles. They've said that all fathers' rights people are pedophiles. That's what Francesca Amata Banfield said. Fathers' rights movement are pedophiles. So you've got that. And then recently she's blurted out there that you don't get 50-50. You don't get 50-50. As a matter of fact, 100% of the custody should be to her because she gave birth. You know what? Last I seen, except for the Virgin Mary, nobody has done this giving birth thing without a male somehow involved. Nobody. So this whole premise of let's just shit can the father because he's a father. And fathers are strong, so they should just take it. They should be beaten down. Being a father, I can tell you, there are things that happen in my own daughter's life that being a strong father is the reason she made it through them. She did. And not disparaging the mother whatsoever, but I'm telling you, all statistics are when there's a missing or absent father and the father is gone from that child's life, that child is headed downhill economically, socially, mentally, financially, every way you can figure. If you alienate that father out, you take him out of play. Now, look, I'm not talking about the dad is incarcerated because the dad's a pedophile, which is the strangest thing to me, Jay, because this Francesca Amata Banfield, for whatever reason, she's not against all men. If they're pedophile men who will blurb her in a book or say good things or get her numbers, those men are okay. Now, that is the weirdest thing to me for a woman to claim that everybody in the father's rights movement, everybody as a dad is bad or a pedophile and should have no custody whatsoever, unless you are a pedophile, a convicted pedophile, in which case she's going to say, oh, they made a mistake whenever they had you plead guilty and go to jail for 10 years. This doesn't make any sense to anybody. And the foolishness going on over that other side over there, the people need to be awakened to it. They need to do just what this survivor did, what this warrior did, Kelly Haines, who we just watched. And that is, it's common amongst all of us that make it. She said, being the detective that I am. See, being a warrior and being loud is one thing, but make sure you get the facts, folks. Just Google it. Just research it for yourself. Don't take my word, Bud's word, Jay's word, Neil Shelton's word. Don't take anybody's word for anything. Just Google it up. If it doesn't add up and it also seems too good to be true, go with your gut. Go with that natural instinct that you have and run like the wind.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. And, you know, I think There's a quite a few verses that struck me in the Bible this week when I was kind of reading through a few things, and I know that there are some people that are not biblical, so I'm prefixing this here to you who are not into the Bible so much, but I think that these verses are kind of like proverbs. They're not really. I mean, they're just good advice, good sound advice. An honest witness tells the truth, but a false witness bears lies. That tells you a lot of the things, and some of those verses that I read through this week kind of broaden everything into this. When I was talking earlier about how that one person who could be a false accuser could affect 9 other people who really were victims, that really tells us that our society generalizes everything. They really paint everything with a broad stroke. So let's say we have 10 people who are in the movement who had their children taken, okay? And one of those happens to be a pedophile. Guess what society is going to think? They're just all a bunch of pedophiles because they're protecting the one pedophile. And I think that we have to, as a quote unquote movement, we need to be more mindful of the fact that we have people out there that are looking at us. And let me tell you something. That's exactly why Randy and Bud and Neil and I have worked very, very hard and very diligently with Maria and all of the team behind the scenes. We have had lawyers on here. We have had people running for judges. We have had GALs. We have had all kinds of people. We have had psychologists. We have had sociologists. We've had Hollywood people on. We've had everyone that we could possibly come to you that is going to give you sound mind, sound advice. See, we contact you at a place in time in your life where you don't know what normal is. That's why we call this the Far From Normal radio show. We're contacting you where you are, far from normal, right? And we're dragging you back into what it's like to create a new normal life for yourself, to come to a rational sense of going to court, fighting for your rights, using what is before you with state statutes, the rules of civil procedure. Yes, you can bring in federal laws. You can bring in FERPA. You can bring in UCCJEA. You can bring those things in. But don't think that you're going to be out there going to Congress and going out here yelling and screaming, remonstrance, remonstrance, because that's just not going to work for you. And honestly, we tell you this because it's the ugly truth. Some people out here do not have balls big enough to tell you the truth. And we do. We do it each and every week. Why? Not because we're out here trying to condemn other people. It's because we love you. Just like a parent would love their kid and correct them and say, hey, look, you pull that hot boiling water off the stove and you're going to burn yourself. That's what we're telling you. And we're saying, hey, look, we've been there. We've been through it. You pull that off of there, you're going to burn yourself. And guess what? You go over there, you mingle with those people, you get involved with their group, you put a bloody thumbprint on something, and the next thing you know, you're being hauled off to jail. All we can do is warn you. That's all our job is here, is to warn you to bring yourself back to a new sense of normal. What is that? It is acting like a civilized human being. It is acting as not as a victim anymore, not as by acting emotionally charged. It's by acting as if you know what you're doing and you know what the outcome's going to be before you even get into a court. That's what we do behind the scenes, is we want to make you so confident. And trust me, people, we don't want your cases. That's not what this is about. I don't want to steal your case. Randy doesn't want to steal your, Bud don't want your case. We're not in it for that. We are in it to empower you to help you win your own case, because no one will fight for your kids like you will fight for your kids. That's why we do what we do. And there are some people that out there that have done it. Cheyenne McQueen, amazing young lady. You know, Randy and I have talked with her in the past, and she's done an amazing job. She won her kids back. She did it, not us. And we give her all the credit for that. And that there are several people who have had those over the years. And we're so thankful for them. We love them. And I'll tell you, you know, Bud, Randy, I don't know if you want to chime in on this, but that's why we do what we do, is we try and empower people to be better than they are right now.
Absolutely right. And look, folks, I'm just telling you, what Jay is saying is 100% accurate. Nobody here wants your case. Nobody here is giving legal advice. The only thing we're here is to tell you we went down that road. We have seen what is down that road. And I'm just going to tell you, family court will put you in jail for contempt. They'll issue a show cause and put you in jail or cause you legal problems for contempt when you didn't do anything willfully in contempt. They'll do it when nothing exists. That's the truth of it. We all know that. So that being said, don't give them reason. Don't give them reason to find you in willful contempt. It is crazy knowing that when you go in there, everybody in there is against you. The cards are all, the deck is stacked against you, and they're going to do as they please in there anyway. What you need to do is try and get as much of your evidence in as you possibly can get in, all of the exculpatory evidence. Then you want to answer all of the lies that are in the DSS reports and GAL court summaries. And you want to stand your ground. You don't want to lose your stuff when you're in there. You don't want to lose your mind. You don't want to go out here on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else where somebody has you out here protesting and acting the fool and give a judge reason to give you psych evaluation. Oh, look, he's sending bloody thumbprints. He's saying he's not a citizen, but he is a citizen. Then he wants to remonstrate or whatever the world that is. Then he wants to do this. He wants to do that. And they're going to label you a lunatic, and you're going to lose your kids. You're going to go through psych evals. You're going to have, at best, supervised visitation or none at all. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to get your rights terminated because you're behaving foolishly. I'm not saying don't fight. But fight like you've got some sense and learn to master your emotions. How do you do that? You do that by being confident in what you're saying. Don't be confident in foolishness, though. Even if you're the best fool out there, you're a fool if you go in there and use foolishness that hasn't worked for you. A lot of times these people asking you to do these things are guinea pigging you. Mm-hmm. They're guinea pigging you because they haven't won their own cases. They've lost everything they've done. Nothing else. They've tried all the other stuff, but their cases were bad cases. In many instances, their cases were bad cases. They weren't going to win their cases, so they lost their cases, but they don't have the stomach to tell you, you know what, I screwed up. I messed up. And because I messed up, now I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go to UFO, flying saucer, bloody thumbprint, affidavit, immunity, arrest a judge, all this foolishness. But I want you to try it first so I can see what happens. Do not be their guinea pig. I'm telling you, I see it. It doesn't make any sense. Don't pay somebody $5, $10 love gift, Zoom class to sell you down the river. At the end of the day, you're going to have to explain this to your kids one day. And I believe we're all going to be reunited with our kids. I won my case. I'm just telling you, I have no dog in the fight, no axe to grind. I won my case. I'm telling you from experience, don't go out here and jump to something that's too good to be true, because it is too good to be true. If it wasn't, there'd be lawyers doing it, GALs doing it. There would be all sorts of people doing it. You're not seeing that. You're seeing losers do it. Don't be with losers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bud, go ahead. And I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about this here real quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and why don't we go ahead and right into shout outs, because we're running right out of time.
Yeah, I was going to say that'll probably work even better.
Yes.
Looking at the clock, unfortunately, we're down to what we call the depressing part of the show, Jay, the last 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, the 12th of March, 2018, Jay, we're getting close to 10 o'clock. Want to thank our guest, Kelly, for coming on. Unbelievable. Very powerful show. Thank you for your candor, your strength, and your courage. Amazing. Give a shout out quickly to our friend of the show, Michelle Williams, Jay, and I know I shared it in the private chat. We're going to try and reach out to this gentleman. A deplorable child support case where this. I won't even get into too many details tonight, Jay. It's so deplorable. We've got to look more into this when you actually watch that video, and I know Randy too. So thank you to Michelle. She tagged me in a comment today, and I watched that video, and it was almost too unbelievable to believe, but unfortunately it's real. So that's something that's so wrong. So, and this gentleman I know is standing up against what's happening to him. So we're going to reach out. I believe his name is Mr. Hall. I had his name written down. But thank you to Michelle. We love her out there. Quickly, to my brother from another mother, Jay Money Moss, thank you as always, brother. I love you. Randy, I love you, pal. Rev it up. And Mr. President wasn't on tonight, but Neil Schultz will be back. We love Neil. Doing great things out there. He's been very busy out there in Alaska, guys. My wife, Allison, love you, baby. And to my two boys, Mace and Carter, love you, dudes. Give a shout out to my friend Shane Jubert. We had a little visit day. That was nice for a couple hours. So love you, Shane. My brother from Brook Village, John Mondu. Got to speak with him today. Aaron and Ian Roberts, Brook Village crew and all my BBC out there outside of Boston. Rich from Avashon in Meredith. He says he tells people he's rich in name only. But I mentioned this Avashon in Meredith because every time we go in there, they're wonderful there. It's a wonderful business. So if you're in the Lakes region in New Hampshire and need to stop by Avashon, that's the one to go to. So hello, Rich. Diane Goggins out there. I've been needing to give her a shout out, and I haven't had a chance. We've had some great conversations. Love Diana Goggins out there. To our crew, FFN crew, Jackie, Melissa, Maria, Chris, MJ, Rutledge. We love you guys. Thanks for all that you do. And Mark Ludwig out there, there's been, again, some great progress there with Americans People Share Parenting. And for everybody out there listening, it ain't over till you say it's over, Jay. And I ain't heard no bell. Keep your chins up. Keep fighting.
He gets the Rocky supporters.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Thank you, guys. I love you all. Keep fighting.
All right. Randy Davis, go ahead. Shout out.
Oh, my God. He took everything. He had it all wrote down like he was at the Academy Award. There's nobody else to think. I mean, White Boy Neil, he covered it all. Jay Moss, I give the shout out to because, look, he nailed Dr. Oz's guest. So you heard right here on Far From Normal, we already intercepted Dr. Oz and kicked Oz to the curb. Plus, we found out earlier in the pre-interview that Dr. Oz is like the size of a pencil. He's like a Q-tip. He's a little tiny joker. And I have to give the biggest shout out to a little girl who now visits with her mother, spends time with her mother, and she's 10 years old today. So to Ashley, Melissa McDonald's daughter, Ashley, happy 10th birthday. Shout out to you because they sent this is how good the show is, guys. They were sending messages today and they watched them at school. The school is like, wow, the Watchmen, Far From Normal, they watch it there. So they wanted the shows to be able to watch them because they learn from it. They really like the Bo Duke because of Dukes of Hazzard, but awesome. They like to say rev it up. They like to watch it all. And this is what it is about, giving the kids some hope. You know, they watch all the court stuff going back and forth. They need to see some hope. They need to see some individuals that are adults behaving like adults. So other than that, that's pretty much my shout outs. I'm grateful to everybody for watching. Love you all and glad I could be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, definitely happy birthday to Ashley out there. So rev it up. And you got it like 3 times there. All right. So awesome stuff. Kelly Haines did a fantastic job. I know she was a little bit nervous once I told her we've had guests on like John Schneider and Prentice Powell and some of the others that we've had. But, you know, I told her it's just like a conversation amongst friends. And that's how we normally do this. That's what it is.
Jay,
yep.
We're sitting in our living rooms, right?
Sitting in our living, yeah. Yeah. Some of us are, and some of us are in a movie theater. I don't know.
Right.
So anyway, We want to thank everybody behind the scenes that make it the Far From Normal radio show, and the Watchmen do such an amazing job each and every single week. Maria out there, all of the people behind the scenes that share the show, all of you who share the show that we haven't even met yet, and we absolutely appreciate it and love it each and every single week. But we are running out of time for this week, so I'm going to get right down to it. As we always say each and every single week, you are important, you are loved, and you are cared about. God bless.
God bless.
Chins up. Keep fighting.
Can you hear the wind that's howling through the concrete trees? Got you praying on your knees. In the face of danger we're all brave, till the gun goes bang, bang, bang. It's a cruel, cruel world, no mercy left, yeah, it's a cruel, cruel world. It'll break your heart and burn you down, down, down. Don't ever doubt that it's a cruel, cruel world. Oh, it's a cruel, cruel world. Smoke will turn your soul to black if you let it in. So close the door, confess your sins. Oh, when I was younger, it was all roses. Now the dead and gone away. It's a cruel, cruel world, no mercy left, yeah, it's a cruel, cruel world. It'll break your heart and burn you down, down, down. Don't ever doubt that it's a cruel, cruel world. Oh, it's a cruel, cruel world. Oh, can you help me? Oh, can you help me out? Don't know who I can trust right now. Oh, can you help me? Oh, can you help me out? Oh, it's a cruel, cruel world. It's a cruel